09137337338 or send in WhatsApp messages via those numbers as well. We're streaming on Facebook. Drop a comment there as well. We can still very much push these questions to Dr. Fabian to respond to later. But we're talking about something cool, insightful next. Do stay tuned.
How do you do it? My skin gives me the extra confidence to light up the room. That's why I'm deliberate about how I nourish my skin. I use a soap made with the right natural ingredients.
A soap? Which one?
A soap that contains shea butter and aloe vera, turmeric, and honey for a glowing skin.
Experience the new Joy Black Soap, made with over 7 natural ingredients that moisturize, restore, and repair your skin, giving you the confidence to be who you love to be. Joy, beauty my way.
Hold on tight.
I'm Olufemi Pedro.
I'm Omoyele Showore.
My name is Honorable Hakeem Dixon.
This is Honorable Adekunle Akobada.
I'm Dele Momodu, and you are listening to Law FM 103.9 for knowledge and entertainment. Your only law radio station.
Alrighty, thanks indeed for being there. It's 40 minutes past 9 o'clock. This is the Law FM Morning Show. You're on the country's premier law radio station, Law FM 103.9. Kingsley BASSEY is my name.
And I'm FELIX UZOMA.
Glad to have you there. Be part of the conversation. We're streaming on Facebook, facebook.com/LawFM 1039. Drop a comment there. We'll see your comment already. Thank you to Zima Josephine for being there, and Oluwatoyin Olowome Ajayi. Thank you as well for being there. We appreciate it. We've got someone on the line who will be talking to us about a recent publication by the British Broadcasting Corporation, and it's more like an investigation. They released that, published that yesterday, which indicates that they had found evidence suggesting some results from Nigeria's February 25 presidential election were manipulated with significant anomalies in Rivers State, a key battleground during the poll. The BBC stated that from its investigation into the issue, Peter Obi of the Labour Party won the election in that state rather than the presidential candidate of the All Progressives Congress, Bola Tinubu, who of course is the president-elect as we speak, and in a few days would be inaugurated as president. Well, joining us to talk about that now is an investigative journalist, and if you've been following the news, one who has been invested in the entire electoral process since it started. Well, I'm talking about David Hundeyin. A very good morning to you, and thanks for joining the Law FM Morning Show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. I'm sure that you've seen, x-rayed this BBC investigation published yesterday, and indeed Nigerians have been talking about that. Let's get your thoughts first and foremost on that when you read it.
Well, so I think I already expressed my thoughts publicly. Basically, first of all, the story itself, even though it's presented as an expose or as an investigation, isn't really telling us anything we didn't already know. This exact story actually was covered by Premium Times about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So there isn't actually anything in the story that we haven't seen before. And even before Premium Times covered the story, people who had been paying attention to the data which was uploaded to the INEC IRF database, and people who have been independently collecting data from the EC8 result sheets across the country, and especially Rivers State, had already flagged this up a long time ago, that the results that were announced for the presidential election in Rivers State were completely fictitious, that Peter Obi won the election in Rivers State, and that somehow between the polling units and the results announcement, this was completely flipped to give Bola Tinubu a victory, which was mathematically impossible. So this didn't really tell us anything we didn't already know. But I think because for the first time, a major international publication has actually dared to basically cast some doubt, even though it's already public knowledge in Nigeria, but because it's in the international space now, that one of the major battleground states, if you like, in the most recent elections, the result that was announced for it was completely fictitious, was completely false. That potentially calls into question the validity or the credibility of the entire electoral exercise, which is the point that many people have been trying to make, which is the point that the two opposition parties are in court currently trying to make. So I think that's the significant takeaway from this story.
Yeah, it is true that Premium Times had covered this, but don't you think that this investigation went a little deeper, especially into personalities, individuals involved in the process who played a role in this entire thing, and what went down in Rivers State?
Well, the thing is, the BBC being what it is, because unavoidably the BBC is seen as an extension of the British government, and anything that the BBC publishes is viewed as a statement of British government foreign policy position, even though that isn't necessarily the case. So I think because of that, they were cautious to only, if you read the article, it was stated that, this is only one state, and on its own it doesn't change the final outcome. It doesn't. The overall voting margin was 1.8 million, blah blah blah. So this doesn't change anything. So they were still trying to play diplomatic. What I think they would have done if they were actually trying to go more in depth was, first of all, examine the data coming out of some other key battleground states. So the data coming out of Plateau, for example, where those who have access to the ECA's result sheets and those who have been looking at the data uploaded to INEC IRF server could tell you that the actual winning margin, even though Peter Obi officially won the election there, but the actual winning margin was a lot more than what was announced. They cut down his lead significantly. More than 500,000 votes disappeared into a void somewhere. Same thing in Lagos State. They made it a really sort of close run thing. Meanwhile, it was more like 80-20 in Lagos. So the story didn't touch on those things at all. It just focused on Rivers State alone. So I think if you're trying to go into depth, you could essentially have mentioned 5 or 6 different states across Nigeria, Nasarawa, for example, and the other states like that, where these discrepancies took place. So you would have made a much bigger case that, as against just the election in Rivers State being compromised, the election around the presidential election nationwide was compromised, which is exactly the point that is being made currently in the post-presidential election tribunal. So I don't think the BBC story did that. I think they were trying to play safe. They were trying to avoid coming across as, we're sort of unofficially communicating that the British government does not approve of the outcome, but the officially announced outcome of the election. So they decided to play it safe.
Or maybe they just published what they found.
Well, I mean, you can't tell me that an organization with the resources that the BBC has, didn't have access to more information or couldn't find more, right? Because even I, at the little level that I operate on, I have access to more of that data. So I know for a fact they definitely have access to data from around the country. It wasn't just Rivers State. So I feel like they decided to restrict themselves to Rivers State because that was a way to tell a story without necessarily telling it to the end.
So you think this is essentially the BBC driving a narrative?
Even if it's not driving a narrative, it's at the very least it's trying to be diplomatic, trying to play safe. So on the one hand, they can say, we did our job as journalists, we flagged up that there were irregularities and this and that. On the other hand, you cannot then say that the BBC cast aspersions on on INEC, which could then be interpreted as the UK, because the BBC is a UK government-funded entity, so it should then be interpreted as the UK government interfering in the electoral affairs of a sovereign nation. So maybe that's why they decided, I kind of have some sympathy for them as well, because I understand that it can be difficult where in a space where once you are a state-funded entity, unavoidably anything you say will be interpreted as a policy position of the state that funds you. So I understand why they also had to sort of play it safe.
Right. David Hundeyin, if you look at this BBC publication, in fact it goes on to break down Obiakpo. If you also look at some contentious areas, Obiakpo, Yigbo and all that. But the BBC itself has been involved in several investigative journalistic works that they publish. Look at the Africa Eye, Sex for Greed, investigative work they did, the work they did on drug abuse, and several others even before now. We have not really seen the change, in quote, that these works were put in the public eye. Do you think that this is going to make any difference?
So,
or what impact?
First of all, I think I'll have to. Yeah. First of all, I think I'll have to disagree slightly when you said that it hasn't resulted in any change. Definitely. So, for example, the Sex for Grace documentary, which was basically put together by what's her name, Oge Obi. Yes. That documentary. In the end, one of the outcomes of that documentary, which for some reason didn't get much media airplay, but two of the lecturers actually who were identified in that documentary were fired. And if you know how difficult it is to have a lecturer in a Nigerian university fired for sexual harassment, it was basically unheard of. Up until that point, and not only the lecturers get fired, legislation was actually passed. So obviously, whether the legislation will be enforced or not is another issue, because enforcement is a major issue in Nigeria. But just for the fact that even happened at all, that's a major thing. That is a triumph of journalism. Now, with regard to what the impact of this could be, the story itself might not have that much of an impact, but the impact here is that it's an organization with the sort of weight that the BBC pulls that is carrying it. So if it's Premium Times that is reporting it, well, Premium Times is a local Nigerian publication. It can be ignored. If the BBC is reporting, the BBC has a much larger global megaphone than any of us here has. So once the BBC says it, first of all, the audience that has seen it is a lot bigger. It's an audience that is in the billions, first of all, because the BBC has a presence on all of the world's 6 inhabited continents. And then secondly, for the fact that it's a UK publicly funded broadcaster and publication, that unavoidably will mean that it will sort of take on a life of its own. There will be speculation within political circles that the political support, or at least neutrality, which appears to have been adopted by Rishi Sunak regarding Nigeria, could that be shifting? Could that be changing? So just for the fact that little uncertainty has been introduced into the mix, that itself creates some sort of an impact. If you're a judge who is sitting on the tribunal and you are aware that global media, with the kind of reach that the BBC has started reporting on this story, and then when you now put that in conjunction with the fact that the US State Department almost at the same time put out a message saying that they've imposed visa bans on people who are involved in electoral malpractice. So if you're a judge sitting on that panel, you then have that sense that, you know what, maybe, and then with the added scrutiny that is coming, you know what, maybe I want to make sure that I deliver a ruling which actually represents some form of justice, because if I misbehave, then I might end up, strung out, globally in front of a huge global audience, which I don't want to happen. So, it's to avoid being hung out to dry. Let me try and do my best. Maybe, obviously, we don't know for a fact that this is what's going to happen. This is just my analysis of the situation, but that's genuinely how I see it.
Right. Yeah. In the investigation by the BBC, David, there's a particular name mentioned that individual, beg your pardon, called Dixon Ariaga, Dr. Dixon Ariaga, and from according to this report, they say they visited the Federal College of Education in Omuku about you right? Omuku, right? Okay, thank you. About 2 hours, 2-hour drive north of Port Harcourt, and they found that from the records, at least according to the deputy provost, there was no such name in the records. That's one.
Yes.
Secondly, they reached out to INEC's regional spokesperson in Port Harcourt, and they were told that due to, and I'll quote, gross shortage of time and personnel, they had needed to take on some people without verifying their identity document. Referring to Dr. Ariaga, he said if he had presented himself as a lecturer from the college and it's otherwise, then he's dishonest, meaning that due diligence wasn't done, allegedly, in this regard.
Yes.
And that maybe impacted the figures as we've seen. Very quickly, because we've got to close soon, what's your thoughts on this, and why do you think that even at this point, no prosecution whatsoever as regards individuals who played a role, or allegedly played a role in falsifying figures, have come up until this report?
Well, so first of all, it should be noted that the Independent National Electoral Commission itself has had a lot of its powers for things like due diligence and vetting of staff and political candidates severely curtailed by successive Electoral Amendment Acts. So I believe it was the Electoral Amendment Act, I think, of 2010 that for the first time took away the power of INEC to vet candidates. So which is how come, for example, there are candidates in this ongoing election who have submitted forged documents and false statements on the INEC EC9s, and INEC by law does not have the power to disqualify them or to verify anything that is said. This, by the law, basically states that you can submit a leaf to INEC and say that that's your certificate, and as long as you submit a sworn declaration along with it swearing that that's your certificate, INEC doesn't have the power to verify or to disqualify anything.
I'm sorry, David. Just hold on for 1 sec. We'll be back in a moment to close. Okay, just hold on for me.
Extra confidence to light up the room. That's why I'm deliberate about how I nourish my skin. I use a soap made with the right natural ingredients.
A soap? Which one?
A soap that contains shea butter and aloe vera, turmeric and honey for a glowing skin.
Experience the new Joy Black Soap, made with over 7 natural ingredients that moisturize, restore, and repair your skin, giving you the confidence to be who you love to be. Joy, beauty my way.
When you listen to this station, you learn about your rights. You discover the law in ways you never imagined. You know why? Because we broadcast in your interest.
It's a problem that we are all experiencing in the country. Different parts of the country, the same thing is happening. So who do we call on to? Who do we hold responsible?
We impact knowledge.
If the grid is unable to shed.
Presenting the Law FM Morning Show.
Alrighty, we've got to go now, unfortunately, and we've been speaking with investigative journalist David Hundeyin. David, I'm sorry we had to cut that, take a commercial real quick, but thank you so much for being there. Just in 10 seconds, your final thought.
Well, I just think ahead of any future elections in Nigeria, the actual electoral framework, the Electoral Amendment Act needs to be amended again, because clearly what we thought the Electoral Amendment Act 2022 was, it hasn't turned out to be.
Thank you so much, investigative journalist David Hundeyin. I see you probably have a cold or something. Sorry about that, and thanks for joining in. We appreciate that. Have a fantastic day. Yeah, God bless you. All right, that's the show. We've got to go.
Absolutely. I wanted to even know what his views are, because there's a new legislation now for independent candidacy. Would that be allowed? Is that what we can work on? But we'll leave it the way it is, and we'll see you tomorrow.
That's right, because it's Wednesday. Yes, Legit Therapist comes up at 10. Please do stay tuned. KINGSLEY BASSEY is my name,
and UZOMA FELIX.
Catch you tomorrow at 9. Bye for